Welcome to the SDG studio. We're talking about affordable, reliable energy services. So let's get started on this one. We have a lot of changes happening. Climate change, fossil fuel, prices rising, population, use, all those things. So this energy crisis is affecting all over, and in your countries, in South Africa, Indonesia. How your teams are actually supporting governments to cope with this challenge and turn this one into opportunity? Valerie.
Well, indeed, I mean, the energy crisis has impacted the country very much. But you have to know also that Indonesia is a country that has made enormous progress. For instance, when you look at energy access, we have 93% of the population that has access to energy, which is not a small feat when you consider that it's 6,000 islands that are inhabited, so therefore it's not easy to organize that. But 7% that have no access to energies, therefore it means more than 18 million people, because we are a big country. So therefore, what we do as UN, knowing that we are also in a country where the government is a strong, well-equipped government with all the necessary competency, we decided as a UN team in Indonesia to really focus on the people who are left behind. So exactly those 7%, for instance, who have no access to energy. Because when there is an energy crisis, the poorest and the most vulnerable are always affected. So what we have done, for instance, is that we have carried out a very detailed, unique study, both qualitative and quantitative, on who is left behind and what. And we have worked with the government so that with the result of this study, the government has been able to adjust and expand its social protection services, but as well as with the support of the joint SDG fund, we have developed, and pulling in all the expertise of the UN agency, some joint programs to, for instance, focus on adaptive social protection. That is to say, social protection in times of crisis. And this has been really an advantage, because then it means that working with the government on the policy, on how to develop a new social protection approach, providing all this expertise, has enabled, therefore, the government to help the population face the crisis. And this is really a work that we have done together. And also what we do is that we work with the National Bureau of Statistics to also help them enhance and improve their own collection of data. Because, you know, if the people who are left behind are not counted, they don't count. You know, so we need also to identify them. And last point is that in Indonesia, we are lucky to have also the laboratory of the Global Pulse. That is really the innovation lab of the UN. And with Global Pulse, we have been able to put at the disposal of the government many ways of analyzing a situation using the strategic foresight, behavioral science, that enable us, therefore, to give to the government a number of tools and information so that they can support their population face a crisis, whether it's the energy crisis or another one.
Thank you. Nelson, what about in South Africa?
I mean, in South Africa, undeniably, the energy situation is concerning on two fronts. You mentioned issues of affordability, certainly, but also reliability. So the country, similar to Indonesia, for example, has made tremendous strides with regards to improving access to energy since 1994 and its history, which is understandably a challenging one. And it's on target, actually, to meet its target of 97% of energy supply to households by 2025. But it's reported, and I think this is the concerning part, 43% of our households still face energy poverty. So, of course, we're also focusing on trying to ensure that the impact of the energy crisis, and when I talk about energy crisis right now in South Africa, is a supply crisis, load shedding, rationing of energy and electricity, which is also then impacting households. It's impacting public infrastructure, schools, water systems, food value chain. So those who are really left behind need the support. And compounding that is COVID and coming out of that as well. So we worked as well with the government through the Joint Energy SDG Fund to really provide expertise around the Social Relief for Distress grant, which has been expanded up to today. And also now working to inform the basic income support, which the country is considering to put in place as permanent support, as a cushion to help those who are going through this challenge. And the UN system has been phenomenal in rallying around, coming together to provide integrated support and advice to government, to different departments in government, engaging the communities to also ensure that this is an inclusive process as we move towards a transition as well.
This is a very important point. You mentioned about transition. So hand in hand with making sure that we have access to affordable, reliable energy services to everybody, to leave no one behind, we must transition.
Yes.
So we must transition to new, affordable, and clean and sustainable energy systems. Yeah. Now this is a big challenge, to go to the low carbon renewables. How do you see sort of countries are coping with it, and what is the sort of UN country team's role in supporting that?
Certainly to ensure the country remains on course, because a transition is inevitable. If you look at the climate crisis we're facing, if you look at our collective responsibility, including South Africa's responsibility to act, so the UN is ensuring and working with the government that no one is left behind in the transition. And actually, people, workers, and communities can positively contribute to the transition. And in South Africa, this is no easy feat. A country that is heavily dependent on coal and fossil fuel for its energy resources, a country that has the bulk of its workers also in industries that are fossil fuel dependent, and from mines to coal power plants, to even the manufacturing sector. So the UN is really providing integrated policy advice, again, to the government, to the different structures, from the presidency, the Presidential Climate Commission, to the Just Energy Transition Secretariat, to all the labor unions, ESCOM, the power generating company, just to say, what is the energy mix you have to consider? What is the transition timelines you have to consider? But how, most importantly, you involve people. So the UN fosters consultations. The UN is also advocating with regards to energy systems that potentially will also benefit those who currently do not have reliable access. So microgrids, wind, solar in remote parts of the country. The UN is also looking at the manufacturing sector, because that's also contributing significantly to the challenge. So what sorts of policy interventions need to be put in place? And lastly, ensuring that women and young people are at the center of jobs for today and for the future. So green skills, upscaling, reskilling, and just mobilizing the international partners to also provide the necessary support.
Thank you, Nelson. What about you, Valerie?
Well, ditto. I would say we are in a similar situation. Indonesia is a country that 70% of its electricity is produced by coal as of today. So it means that, yes, the transition is an imperative because the level of pollution is enormous. But it's a country that has high ambition because it wants to be the fourth economic power in 2045. So it means that the whole economy has to be transformed along this transition of energy. And that's why, at the level of the UN, we work on the two fronts. First, the energy transition, equal to South Africa, we work on the just energy transition, so therefore working to help the government to look at the situation of workers, upskilling, reskilling, everything that Nelson has mentioned, we do have the same approach. But also looking at the transformation of the economy, so that the economy of tomorrow, the one that will lead the country to be the fourth economic power in the world in 2045, will not be dependent on natural resources, but will be dependent maybe on human resources. So what we have done, pulling together the strength of the UN, was really to have all the agencies together, putting together a one strategy on sustainable energy that really tackled the nexus energy, poverty, gender equality, as well as climate action. And last point is that we're also working on the financing of the SDGs, because all this needs money. And we have developed some projects whereby we support the government in issuing SDG bonds, green bonds, blue bonds. And right now we have actually contributed, for $1 invested, to $250 generated for the SDGs.
Valerie, Nelson, thank you very much. Fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.